Hello, and welcome back to the Thecrimereel. This is day 4 of 7 of our travel around the 7 continents. For today's true crime narration, we shall be going to Africa, the second largest of the world's 7 continents. Home to 54 countries, we shall be visiting the 6th most populated of these, South Africa. Stellenbosch is one of the best known towns in South Africa, becoming one of its leading tourist destinations due to its history, culture, vineries and natural beauty. However, in May 2007, it was the scene of a brutal crime, the perpetrator of which was not brought to justice for over a decade. 31-year-old Felicity Cilliers was a seasonal farm worker at Longlands Farm in Stellenbosch. She had 3 young sons aged 13, 9 and 14 months old. She was well known and well liked within her local community. She was softly spoken, friendly and kind. Felicity had 2 siblings, a sister, Daleen, and a brother, Denzel. On 26th of May 2007, a local person was having a 21st birthday party. Lots of people had been invited and it was set to be a large, fun night out. Felicity decided to attend, but her sister Daleen had opted for a night in with her boyfriend instead. As Felicity left to go to the party that evening, it would be the last time that her sister would ever see her alive. Felicity never returned home that night, and 4 days later, the family received the heartbreaking news that Felicity's body had been found in the vineyards on a farm in the Vlottenberg area of Stellenbosch. Felicity had suffered an extremely violent death. She had been brutally sexually assaulted, strangled, and had sustained massive head injuries. A police investigation followed. 2 men were arrested but released after it was found that they were not a DNA match. Eventually, all leads dried up, and within months the case had gone cold. Felicity's death, along with the additional trauma of knowing that someone had got away with her murder, took a tremendous toll on her family. Within months of her murder, Felicity's previously healthy 14-month-old son died from complications related to gastroenteritis. Felicity's family believed that he had died from the grief of losing his mother. Felicity's father's health deteriorated over the years as he struggled to come to terms with losing his beloved daughter and the violent nature of her death. Her 2 older sons, just 13 and 9 at the time of her murder, started to struggle in school and eventually dropped out completely. Finding it impossible to deal with the events of their mother's death, they never really spoke about their feelings. Over time, they have both become addicted to drugs. It wasn't until many years later, in 2018, that the family were finally able to achieve some closure. Sergeant Kelvin Moses had taken over responsibility for investigating the case in 2016. This was 9 years after the murder took place. He was determined to do his utmost to find some answers for a family who had suffered so much. It was a conversation between the sergeant and Felicity's father, Johannes, that ultimately led to the break which they had all been searching for. Johannes told him that another woman had been found about a month after his daughter. She had been murdered in the same way. Due to the fact that Sergeant Moses had only joined the team several years after the murder, he had no knowledge that there had been a second crime. He asked Johannes if anyone had been charged with that murder, and he replied that a local man, Andrew Jordan, had been imprisoned for the crime. In 2007, Andrew had been living in the same area as Felicity and was friends with both Felicity's sister, Daleen, and Daleen's boyfriend. The whole family knew of Andrew and generally regarded him as a friendly and trustworthy person. Andrew was arrested in late 2007, shortly after the second murder took place. The family was shocked at his arrest. Andrew pleaded guilty to the murder charge and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. In spite of the fact that there were striking similarities between this murder and Felicity's death, the family believed that he was not responsible for Felicity's murder. Despite extensive research, I've been unable to find why they believed in his innocence. Most reports either do not mention this or state that the family did not believe he was involved, as he didn't really know Felicity. After serving just 6 years of his sentence, Andrew had been released on parole in 2013. Sergeant Moses and his colleague Sergeant Roger Euster compared Andrew's DNA to that which had been found on Felicity after she had been murdered. It was found that the semen present at the scene of the crime belonged to Andrew. In July 2018, the sergeants tracked down Andrew, who was now living in Zoar near Ladysmith. When interviewed, he was asked if he had ever had sex with Felicity. He stated that he had not. With the DNA evidence proving that Andrew was lying, Sergeant Moses had sufficient grounds to make an arrest. The case went to trial in the spring of 2019. Andrew pleaded not guilty. Simply the presence of his DNA would not automatically prove his guilt. It was still necessary to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. When Andrew was confronted with the DNA evidence by the prosecution team, he changed his story and said that he had had consensual sex with Felicity. This version of events was not believed by the court, particularly due to the level of violence Felicity had experienced during the sexual assault. Prosecutors suggested that Andrew had managed to lure Felicity away from the party to a secluded area of the farm, showing that there had been a level of pre-planning involved. He then sexually assaulted her, strangled her, and beat her around the head with a rock. Felicity's father, Johannes, who stated that he would never rest until the person responsible for his daughter's death was punished. He attended the trial every day, looking much older than his 65 years. Also present were Felicity's brother and sister, Denzel and Daleen. At the Western Cape High Court on May 19, 2019, Andrew was found guilty. Throughout the trial, Andrew did not show any remorse for Felicity's murder and never apologised to Felicity's family. The sentencing proceedings were scheduled for October that year, in order for Andrew to receive treatment for his severe depression and suicidal tendencies. On 24th of October 2019, Andrew appeared in court to find out his sentence. He did not testify at these sentencing proceedings and provided no additional information as to what had happened on the night of 26th of May 2007. His defence team requested that the court took into account the fact that Andrew had been both neglected and abused as a child, stating that he was an example of the problem when the cycle of child abuse was not addressed and the victims grew into adults. The court was also advised that Andrew was still suffering from severe depression and had attempted suicide twice in recent times. His legal team argued that Andrew was under the influence of alcohol when the crime was committed, and it was this that had driven him to such violence. They also pointed out that he had not been involved in any further crimes since his release on parole in 2013. Noting that Andrew had a propensity for violence against women and had shown no remorse for his crime, Judge Lister Nuku sentenced 35-year-old Andrew to life in prison for Felicity's murder, plus an additional 10 years for the sexual assault. After the sentencing was completed, an extremely relieved Johannes, flanked by his remaining daughter and son, were photographed outside the court. They said that they were happy with the sentence and relieved that their ordeal was finally over. They would now try to move on and remember Felicity for the soft and kind person that she was. For the Cilliers family, it has been an extremely long and emotional journey, lasting over 11 years before Felicity's killer was finally brought to justice. The family believe that their healing can now begin. That concludes the story of Felicity Cilliers. Thanks very much for listening. As usual, if you have any comments, please add them down below. As we're continuing with the 7 videos in 7 days, I'll be back tomorrow at 12 midday. Thanks very much for listening to Thecrimereel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Just wanted to say thanks to Sergeant Kelvin Moses and his team for solving this case eventually. Great job. Rest in peace, Felicity. Goodbye.